Welcome back to Q-Dads. I'm Steve, and episode 4 of Constellation has just dropped, giving us more depth to the show, but actually only a little bit more mystery. I say this as a lot of things that happened we kind of predicted. I'll touch more on that in a moment. And also, we have a great theory that puts death as the key for experiencing these multiple realities. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you subscribe, as we'll be covering every episode as they drop. The show opens with Magnus and Alice heading towards the woods, but without Joe. This is presumably the reality where Joe is dead, and I imagine connecting to the events of the first episode where Joe sees a lost Alice, unsure of her mum. The question still remains, what happens to Magnus? The family then celebrate Joe's belated birthday, and through a rather unusual Swedish joke, we are reminded that this version of the family doesn't understand Swedish. We cut across to Henry, as he makes some notes stemming around lithium-7, some drug that seems to be used as an antidepressant. Now, lithium-7 is actually a terrestrial element and was found in the Big Bang itself, so very interesting that they use that. Not only that, a quick Google mentions it's used in cooling nuclear reactors. As the world of Constellation closely matches ours, I'm wondering if it's something to do with cooling reactors when trying to prove quantum physics. Could lithium-7 actually cause the effects of multiple realities to happen more frequently? So they are given these drugs not to help them, but to cause the effects more so they can be monitored. Henry also notes the words death in space. Now again, I presume this is a reference to Irene, as she is predicted to be the dead cosmonaut, which was also picked up later in the episode with the recordings sent to Joe. Henry worries that the Kell project is going to be shut down due to the fact only he can see the data. Joe is diagnosed with PTSD. Yeah, she's suspicious of the drugs, later testing them. Henry talks to Joe in an attempt to see if she's also experiencing the same symptoms as him and can view the Kell data in the same way. Bud, on the other hand, is being questioned by the FBI over the death of the convention guy. Yet, later in the episode, the CCTV seems to be distorted, which makes me think, is it radiation or lithium-7 that distorts the CCTV, or is the FBI agent, like Alice, also able to experience these alternate realities? It was interesting to see that the CCTV was distorted or interfered with in the same pattern as the interference Henry sees from the Kell. Coincidence? I think not. As mentioned a minute ago about Joe testing the drugs due to being suspicious, she realises that not only has she been given the same drugs, but also hers varies slightly compared to the others. This is where I think the show picks up for me. She accesses a list of who is on this drug and realises that her, Harry and 2 others, Amanda Klein and Sally Lynch, are all on the same B version stabilising drug. Now interestingly, Amanda and Sally have also been to space, claiming they are seeing people who are deceased, but the question is, are they from the alternate reality where Joe is gone, or from yet another reality? Or, as Henry alludes to in the episode, are their versions of reality only present inside their minds? Meaning everyone would have a different alternate reality compared to everyone else. It was great to see here that the German cleaners were actually from the world where Joe had died. Now, Ben did admit he didn't expect that and thought they were just blanking Joe. But for our eagle-eyed viewers and myself, if you look back to the scene where they go into the corridor when she first sees the cleaners, the camera cuts to the cleaners' point of view and Joe isn't there. So I'd already started to question which reality they were in at that point. Just continuing this whole section for a moment. When Joe stumbles past Henry talking to his computer, my first thoughts here was this was a conversation between Bud and Henry, which is later confirmed. Joe's realities continue to bleed into one another as she has trouble driving, seeing the IIS and almost causing her to crash. She then gets a very interesting letter from the Marine Observatory where they provide 2 recordings. The first being Joe, but still with these muffled voices, but the second being a recording of a female cosmonaut as she dies in space. Now looking at the previous episodes, it's pretty clear here that this is Irene Lysenko. This doesn't just confirm that we move reality, but also that 2 or more realities have been shifting since the late 60s, as Irene is clearly alive in this reality, and I'm pretty sure she's not been to space in this reality either. Ben did mention to me though, could the shift in reality also affect time? Now we end the show on the most unanswered question I think of the series, which is Alice. Alice then peers into the reality of Joe's death, where Paul and others are at a wake for Joe. Now, two things. The first being that Paul actually noticed Alice looking at him, and so did Alice. Did they also notice Joe and Magnus too? The second is that Alice actually saw this, not Joe. Why the hell can Alice see the alternate realities? She was not in space or involved in any ways. Was it her exposure to the Cal data core? Yeah, I presume that came after these events, when Joe takes it. It just doesn't make sense, and I don't think it will until the end of the series. But why her? And why does Magnus shove her in a cupboard?
Don't put her in the fucking cupboard!
And then we get our final scene, a slow zoom into a new painting of a devil stirring a pot, but looking away. Firstly, I think these paintings are symbolic of the events. So we've seen an angel and a devil. I have some thoughts about this at the end, so bear with me. Secondly, this room, I don't believe it's Joe's. I think this is Henry or Bud's room. It looks like there's an American flag, and also there's a statue of a dog. Looking at the decoration in Joe's very modern house, these feel out of place. I think they're more suited to an older man. So seeing as this is the third picture now, I fully expect each person affected to come across one of these pictures. Overall, I think the series is picking up well, but I do want to touch on what I mentioned at the start. We kind of already knew that Paul is alive in one world and Joe is dead. They hinted at this a lot in this episode, but it actually wasn't a surprise. So, let's dig a little bit more into some of the questions. For me, the biggest mysteries lie around Alice, Henry and Bud. Bud is clearly trying to get back to his normal life, and Henry is doing the same, hence his obsession with getting the Cal data to work. Now in the scene where Henry and Bud were talking, it almost looked like Bud was trapped. And I've been thinking about this. What if Henry is able to transfer between realities at times? So actually, Henry killed the conference guy? Which would make sense when Bud said Henry is at fault for the other things. Also, the fact Henry got into that reality at that time could be why the CCTV is experiencing the same interference pattern as the Cal. The show does touch on the infidelity of Joe and Magnus from each other, but this isn't the most interesting, and again the only takeaway is that one universe, they were happy. But we have an interesting theory around death, which involves Magnus also experiencing these jumps, but we just haven't seen his point of view yet. Now, we speculate that death is the key. We say this as all astronauts can experience the left hand of God and have glimpses of dead loved ones guiding them back to safety. Now, speaking of dead relatives, Henry only mentioned dead loved ones speaking to them, but Amanda and Sally, the astronauts, saw angels. But people dying and become angels seems to be a common belief. But either way, Amanda and Sally don't seem to have the entwined reality like Joe, as they were always meant to survive. It's only the fact that Joe, Paul and others are meant to die in their own life, meaning they now experience moments from both worlds. Does an encounter with death in one world cause them to become entwined in another? This is why Magnus can also be seeing the realities collide, and even Alice. Are they both meant to die in one world? As clearly we're seeing some form of butterfly effect now. We've speculated several times that Magnus is dead, and that end scene is leading that way. There's also mention of one of the other astronauts killing their husband. We speculate Joe and Paul switch places, but what if Joe was never meant to survive? And thus, balance needs to be maintained. This also feels to me that it's backed up by the picture. So at the very start of the episode, Alice and Magnus enter the cabin. Now, when was this? Is it a past event? Is it a future event? And what reality? Well, if you cast your mind back to the end of episode 1, I think this is the house with the devil picture in, or a picture of death. They don't show the inside in this episode. But in episode 2, when Joe takes Alice back to the cabin with the other Alice, the picture is back to the original one with the angel in it. This is showing me that one cabin exists in one reality and one in the other. Either way, the angel is blindfolded and the demon/death is looking away. I think this seems to be a key detail. Also, while looking back, I noticed they're being carried on what looks like a stretcher, with two men dressed in black, or mourning clothes, again symbolising death. I genuinely think the series will end with the death of Alice. The only bit of confusion with the whole theory lies with Henry and Bud Caldera, as they both exist, but my theory around this stems from Irene. Were Henry and Bud never meant to go to space? Apollo 18 doesn't exist in our world, for example. Could Irene's trip to space have caused the initial reality to split or merge, and her death in one causes ripples across both lines, and in some weird butterfly effect causes all the issues with the other astronauts? It sounds far-fetched, but could the Cal actually have the opposite effect to what we see? We always see the interference as one atom splitting or duplicating, and only Henry seems to see this. What if the Cal is attempting to merge the two realities back to one? Anyways, let us know your thoughts on the events. Do you think Magnus is dead? Is Henry able to move through realities? Do you think Alice will die? As why can she see different realities? And finally, do the pictures hold the key to solving the mystery of these realities? Because I still think the fact the devil or death, or whatever you want to call it, is stirring a pot, and this seems symbolic of causing chaos. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and like, as it helps us to grow and keep bringing you these recaps and theories. Thanks for watching, and as always, catch you next time with something new.